Hello and welcome to another podcast brought to you by eracing.net. I'm Harry Benjamin. In today's show, we look forward to what the 2016 leg of the Formula E season has in store for us, with the first race of the new year, Buenos Aires, just around the corner. Joining me today to discuss all the ins and outs of the Formula E paddock are Stefan Ruitenberg, Lawrence Thorne and Bethany Waring. A welcome to you all. Now, Lawrence, let me start with you. Thanks for joining me. Some major driver news coming in the last week as Jacques Villeneuve and Venturi have parted ways, with Mike Conway, Toyota's LMP1 driver in the World Endurance Championship, stepping in for the next round. Based on Villeneuve's performances, a 14th place, an 11th place, and he didn't even start his final race, it was only a matter of time before he was replaced, wasn't he?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yes. I think judging by the experience he's got and judging by the reputation he has, and obviously he's very well known from his time in Formula One, etc., his results on paper don't look great. But I think when you take each race individually and look at them, I think he has been hard done by. For example, in Beijing, he was hit by Da Costa. Completely Da Costa's fault. Da Costa admitted it. Villeneuve was out of the race. He qualified, I think, 12th, which is not great, but for a rookie, not too bad. Obviously, his race was ruined by that. So that's the 14th place. He was hit out the race. In Putrajaya, he, I think, had some battery problems and he had some car problems and he didn't manage to do a lot of free practice. So again, for a rookie, obviously he's a very experienced driver, but the Formula E car is kind of different to what he's driven before. I think, obviously, if you miss out in free practice on a new track, etc., you'll struggle. And then, obviously, Punta del Este was the worst one because he crashed in qualifying and wasn't able to start. That was his fault. That was a bad error. But I think the first two races, he was hard done by with technical issues, other drivers hitting him. So it's a shame he didn't stay in the series longer, because with his experience and his kind of, savviness, it would have been interesting to see how he would have progressed as the season went on. Because obviously, he's the most kind of, well-known driver we have in the series. He's won an F1 World Championship. He's got that experience. I think it's a shame that we're not going to see him driving for Venturi, because Sarrazin has shown how quick the car is. So I think if Villeneuve had kind of got up to speed and had just one weekend without any problems, we might have seen some good results from him. But I guess we'll never know that now.
Well, do you think maybe his age comes into it? It's no secret that he's the oldest one in the paddock. Is this Formula E machinery just maybe a bit too complex?
I don't know. I think this, the Formula E car, obviously it's quite complex with all the different, the battery management and all the software. And because the teams are building their own powertrains this year, there are a lot more issues coming in for some teams than others. And looking at his quotes from the last few races, for example, in Beijing, he had a problem with his dashboard consumption. So he had to slow down and let himself regenerate his battery because he thought the battery was almost running out. And in Putrajaya, he wasn't able to practice in one of the sessions because he had to change his engine. So I think age maybe is a part of it. It might have taken him longer to learn the car, but I think with his experience and his previous successes, he would have been able to do it. I mean, Sarrazin is no spring chicken. I think Sarrazin is 39 or something, and he's doing just fine. So I do think the Venturi car has suffered from reliability issues. I think that's the main reason why his results have not been too great, to be honest.
Well, he's certainly a very credible name to add to the Formula E driver roster. And perhaps his demise just showcases perhaps the driver and team talent and how high it is within this series.
Definitely. I mean, he's got such a reputation, but obviously his greatest achievement was in 1997, which was almost 20 years ago now, which makes me feel old.
Well, 18 years ago, actually.
But obviously we have a lot of great young talent in the series, guys who are either, in their late 20s or early 30s, a lot younger than him, who maybe haven't had the F1 success that he has had, but they've come from other championships and they're doing far better. It does show the competitiveness of the series, definitely. But one thing I did find interesting, when Venturi announced he'd left, they said it was due to a mutual agreement because of disagreement over the future direction of the team. And Villeneuve himself gave a quote where he said, now he'll be able to work on other projects. He's a race driver. His objective is to race. Even though he's in his 40s, he still wants to race. He still wants to compete. And I found his quote about other projects interesting because it makes me think maybe he's not done with Formula E. Maybe he's interested in going to another team that would have him maybe, and try and develop that team and put that one forward. Because with his experience, he would be an asset to another team. I'm sure there's at least one other team in the paddock that would give him a chance, purely based on that.
An asset as a driver or perhaps in a managerial position? We saw Oriol Servia head in that direction after taking the first few ePrix in the first season.
Interesting question. Obviously, with Jarno Trulli last year, he did the whole season as a driver.
Yep.
And the idea was that Trulli would move into a team management role this year, and then Trulli would then, he'd then be the team boss of his own team. Obviously, that didn't work out. It'll be interesting to see, actually. Villeneuve, obviously, his kind of know-how would be useful for a team in a managerial capacity, but I don't think he's a spent force as a driver yet. We didn't see a lot of him in Formula E, actually, because of all the problems. We didn't actually see a lot of his driving. But even a couple of years back, he was still competing in NASCAR and Le Mans and things like that, which, you can't compete at those levels if you don't still have the talent. So I'll be really interested to see, A, if another team does take him, and B, what his role would be, because he's leaving it very open, saying about other projects. So he's kind of got my mind thinking there that maybe he's thinking about another drive from Formula E, but we'll just have to see. Obviously, it's quite a small grid this year because Trulli has dropped out. There's only 18 cars, so it's going to be tough for him to find another drive, but there might be a couple of struggling teams that would consider it at least. Let's see.
Absolutely. Well, Mike Conway is set to replace him. He was initially set to race for Dragon last year, but that didn't come off in the end. Do you think he will prove a good signing for perhaps the long term? Although Venturi haven't confirmed whether he is to race yet, you'd expect his outing this weekend will be the decider in that.
I absolutely love this move, to be honest. Mike Conway is a driver I've been watching for a long time. I'm going to show my age again. 2006, when he was driving in British Formula 3 and he won the championship, was when I first saw him. So I've known about him for 10 years now. And I actually went to a race weekend that season and watched him drive, and he was just dominant. He was just driving away from the front, dominant, against a good field. Bruno Senna was in that field. Oliver Jarvis, who's now an Audi factory driver in LMP1, was in that field. Salvador Duran was in that field, actually. And he was just the class of the field, in a very strong field. And since then, he's gone to GP2 and he's won a race, despite driving for a pretty backmarker team. He's been an F1 tester. He's won races in IndyCar. In WEC, he's been very successful. And a lot of the drivers in Formula E now who are doing well, for example, Buemi, Di Grassi, they've also done well in WEC. I think a lot of the skills from World Endurance can transfer over to Formula E. So I think Mike Conway is going to be a very, very good signing for Venturi. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that, because when I read they were replacing Villeneuve, I wasn't sure who the replacement might be. I thought it might be somebody who, would just come in for a race or two and do a decent job. But I think Mike Conway can be an excellent driver in this series. I really love this move.
Well, he's partnering Stefan Sarazan, who he's already teammates in the Toyota LMP1 program. So there should be some pretty good chemistry there already to hopefully move the team forward.
Exactly. They've struggled this season so far with reliability, and also they've had a bit of bad luck in the races. If they can get the reliability going, Sarazan has shown the pace that the car has. Conway's got experience and speed, so has Sarazan. That could be a really good driver pairing. I like to think back to last year when Dragon Racing signed Loic Duval in the middle of the season. Duval and D'Ambrosio in the second half of last season, the Dragon car got quicker, it got more reliable, and those two put in some really, really good results, and the team charged up the standings from like 5th or 6th, and they finished 2nd in the end. I feel like Venturi, with these two drivers, if they get on top of their car, could have a kind of similar effect with these two really quick, really experienced guys pushing the team forward. They could be outsiders for race wins as we get towards the end of the season. I definitely could predict that.
Well, we shall have to wait and see. Many teams chopped and changed their driver lineups last year, in the last season. However, regulations brought in this year means that they can only have a maximum of 2 driver changes. Conway stepping into the fray and Oliver Rowland's one-off performance for Mahindra, while Nick Heidfeld recovered from injury, were the only notable changes for last year. But now, news has broke last week that Nathaniel Burton and Team Aguri have parted ways, and only 2 days ago they announced what many people expected, that almost Trulli driver and former Aguri driver Mexican Salvador Duran will replace him. How do you rate Duran? He's popular amongst the fans, and with a Mexico race this year, he'll certainly be in demand.
Yeah, I think Duran's a good driver. I think he's not a world beater. He's not a driver who's likely to contend for the championship. But a team like Aguri, that are obviously a team that's using last season's powertrain, so they're a team that's not developing a new powertrain this season. They're not probably expecting to fight for the championship. They're looking to develop and consolidate. I think getting back together the driver lineup that they had for the bulk of last season, which was Da Costa and Duran, I think is really good for them. I think Duran last season, he came in after not racing for many years. I think he was rusty. I think he took a few races to get into it, but very quickly, in his second race, he was 8th, but got disqualified because of an energy problem. I think, he went over the energy limit.
Yeah.
He got a point in his 3rd race already. Then in Moscow, he was 6th, and he actually was awarded our ERN driver of the race in Moscow for that performance. And the end of the season in London, he was 8th. So Duran got 3 points positions and then one that was taken away from him in about half a season, which I thought was pretty impressive for a guy who was really rusty compared to everyone else in the field who's kind of been driving recently in single-seaters or endurance or whatever. And I was disappointed that he wasn't able to drive for Trulli, because I was interested to see what he could do in the Trulli car. Obviously, now we know the Trulli car unfortunately didn't really go anywhere. So I'm really happy to see him back, actually. I think he'll do a fairly good job. And he was fairly competitive against Da Costa last season. When you consider Da Costa is an F1 reserve driver, he's won races in DTM, Da Costa's got this kind of reputation about him that he's a driver on the up. I think Duran did quite well against him, considering that last season.
Well, he replaces Frenchman Nathaniel Berton. Berton had a pretty good first outing, but since then, he's probably most known for crashing into Jean-Eric Verne several times during a race weekend.
Yeah, I think for Berton, it was a little bit of an underwhelming driver choice, I think. In GP2, he's won one race, he's been okay. In World Endurance and European Le Mans Series and LMP2 class, he's been okay. He's not the world's best driver. He's not the driver who's going to set the world alight. And I think in Beijing, he was really helped by the the full course yellow timing. I think Oliver Turvey was helped by this and a few others as well. The full course yellow, which is ironically for his teammate Da Costa crashing into Villeneuve, which we've just discussed, that really helped Berton. I think he was 16th before that, and he jumped up to 8th place as a result of it, and he was able to keep hold of that position well. He drove a good second stint, but I think he wouldn't have got into those points in the first place if not for a bit of luck. And his luck ran out in the second and third races. I think in Putrajaya, the high temperatures and the battery consumption really harmed him. As a rookie, he was not really able to get the most out of the battery as other drivers were. He had a few car issues as well, but I do think he struggled on that weekend. And in Punta del Este, he had a few issues again, but he didn't really drive that well either. So I feel like he kind of underperformed a bit, and I think the first weekend was a bit of a false dawn because of the lucky timing he got with the full course yellow, and I'm not too surprised that he's replaced, actually. When we knew that Duran was not going to drive for Trulli because of their situation, I did half expect him to come back in for Berton at some point, and obviously it's happened now with the Mexican race in mind. I guess they want to give him Buenos Aires to get back into the frame of the car. Duran, and then for Mexico he'll be the home driver. So that didn't surprise me too much, actually.
Okay, well, we've mentioned Antonio Felix da Costa already. He was the man that won last time out, a bit of a surprise victor. Can he and Team Aguri be the surprise again this year?
Yeah, I think they can. Nobody expected Da Costa to win in Buenos Aires last year. He missed the first race in Beijing. The next two races were kind of average. Buenos Aires was this mad race where, penalties, crashes, more penalties, more crashes. Somebody had to win, and, Da Costa did the best job to finish the race as the winner. This season, he's done very well. If you think Aguri is the team that's been using last season's powertrain along with Andretti, Da Costa didn't do much testing in the summer either. It was a lot of different French drivers like Lapierre and Dillman were trying the car. Da Costa came in for Beijing and nobody was really expecting a lot. Obviously, he crashed into Villeneuve there, but the last two races, Da Costa's been fantastic. In Putrajaya, he qualified 4th with an old car, and he was leading the race until he had some software issues and still finished 6th, even though he spent half a lap basically stationary on the track, pressing Control-Alt-Delete and trying to reset his car. And then in Punta del Este, he also qualified 8th and managed to finish 6th as well. So the last two races for Da Costa have been really successful. He's really shown his pace, and also I think he's maturing as a driver. I think he's one of these drivers who in his younger days was a bit hot-headed, but I think he's maturing a bit now. I definitely think he can win in Buenos Aires. Obviously, EDAMs are the favourites. Obviously, Apt are one of the favourites too. But Buenos Aires last year was a crazy race. This year could also be a crazy race. So I think Da Costa has a very good chance of at least competing for the podium. If things go his way, he could also win. Formula E's like anyone can win, basically. He has to be one of the guys who's definitely thinking he can do it.
Well, we have lots of drivers to look out for then. We can see exactly what Mike Conway can do I think it's fair to say, an underperforming Venturi car at the moment. And I'm sure fans around the world will love to see Duran back in Formula E after gaining momentum at the end of last season. Lawrence, many thanks.
Thank you, Harry.
Now, Bethany, from the back of the grid to the front, Formula E has built up a rapport for excellent competitive racing up and down the field. But with Sebastian Buemi and EDAMS at the top of their respective championships, are we in danger of seeing them break out as the dominant ones to beat this year?
I don't think we can really say for sure at the moment. We've only had 3 races, and one of which they did awfully in. But if anybody at the moment is going to break away from the rest of the group, it's going to be Edam's. And I think of the two Edam's drivers, Seb Remy is the one that would break away if we were going to go with drivers.
So do you reckon he's definitely the sort of the number one in that team with Nico Prost the backup?
Are we going to call Prost a second driver?
Well,
I think Nico's had a lot of bad luck so far this season, hasn't he? But of the two of them, from what we've seen so far and from last season, then yes, I would bet on Remy doing better than Prost.
Okay, so what do you expect to see this weekend out in Buenos Aires? We've will it be a dominant Buemi, or could we see a surprise victor like last year? We had Da Costa win in the Aguri car. One thing that I'm sort of looking out for is the Dragon Racing duo. They certainly look like they're due for a win. Certainly, and more podiums.
They are. I think if all things go to plan for Edams, it will be them on top. I think if everything goes as they expect it to, Edams will be on top. But I think if anybody else were going to be up there, it would be Dragon or Apt. Apt are definitely not one to rule out.
Okay, well, away from the racetrack, Formula E recently launched their Race-Off series with the help of Forza Motorsport. Two historical names were once again pitched against each other in the form of Senna, Bruno that is, and Prost, Nico of course. Bruno Senna came out on top after a one-on-one three-race battle with Prost, during which they raced on several virtual racetracks using Forza's 2014-15 season Formula E cars. However, they were also pitched against the public before that, with several rounds taking place until a winner was found. The winner was not indeed Senna or Prost, who could only manage a measly 7th and 8th place respectively. But what the programme aims to do is engage a new generation of fans to support racing and electric and green energy. My question to you, Bethany, is was it successful in achieving just that?
I think it definitely has. It's engaging the fans. I'm not the biggest fan of last time's event, but it was good at what it did. I think their choice of drivers were tiresome, like we've seen this a million times, but the concept was amazing, and it'll be interesting to see where they'll go with that next, and if they can keep it going, and if it will continue to attract the younger generation like they want to.
And also it gives a sort of a whole new level to gamers and a gaming aspect for Formula E. They're trying to make the series as adaptable and as approachable as possible to young fans, to old, and to gamers. That virtual interaction, how do you think that helps Formula E?
Definitely, it's carrying on with what Formula E is trying to do, isn't it? Not only how close fans can get to the driving, but also now going into driverless cars, it's carrying on with the whole being of Formula E, what it's going to achieve. So the gaming aspect is just another aspect of that, and it's worked for that, hasn't it? Especially with such top gamers there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Formula E race-off will continue with another duo of drivers later on in the year. Time now to head over to our technical analyst, Stefan. With the series all about manufacturers showcasing their innovative technology, Formula E has become a hotbed of tech development. Stefan, there are so many tech stories going on in the paddock that we can't focus on all of them. But let me start with one problem that has plagued the teams on and off since last year: suspension. This hasn't been as controversial as last year, but with Dragon Racing's Jerome D'Ambrosio and Loic Duval forced to retire from podium positions in Putrajaya due to their suspensions failing, what can Formula E do to stop this from happening? Is it just a case of reinforcing them, as it appears they have done since last year, and although it is happening less, we are only 3 races in?
Yeah, well, the biggest issue is because they're steel. It's not the most rigid material available, but to keep the cost down, we've got to keep the steel. We have reinforced the steel to figure a couple of extra millimetres. I think it's 2. As we can see, it's still not enough. But a wishbone's always going to break with solid contact up against a concrete wall. So the best thing is, though, is to move away from the steel wishbones. But to keep costs low, it's a bit of a dilemma because most people want carbon fibre, but that's got profound effects for the cost of each chassis. So it's about finding the right correlation, and I don't think we're there yet, in my opinion.
Okay, well, when can we be there? Do you reckon there's a time scale? Is this a matter of urgency that Formula E needs to address?
I think we've got to look at it in a sensible manner, because Formula E is all about sustainability. But as Alejandro Agagas has said many times, he wants to keep the cost of the championship and each car low. So I would like to hear an outcome before the start of season 3. That kicks away, because I do think it's an issue.
Well, another thing that has caught the eye of many this year is that all the teams have gone for different transmissions. With Next TV and DS Virgin in particular, they're both going for a single gear transmission, and they're in fact in the minority. Subsequently, both appear to be suffering from an overweight car, with Next TV perhaps coping worse than Virgin in recent races. What is the advantage that these teams have tried to gain by going with a single gear in the first place, as opposed to the traditional gear setup?
Well, the correlation between, let's say, a fourth gear motor, like the Hewland one, but the teams like Virgin and Nextev, who've gone for the one gear motor, there's actually not much of a correlation, like difference-wise, between them both. It's all about packaging, and because Nextev have got double motors, they wanted to go for a smaller unit, so it'd be better to package. Because if you've got the spline going from the motor to the gearbox, it's only got one gear on it on the input shaft, so there's less cogs in the actual gear case, so you saved about 50% on packaging. So it's all about what you can actually package in the back of the car, because the Dallara chassis doesn't really give you much space at all.
Do you think they might maybe even abandon their design plans and go for the more conventional setup, especially if Nextev want to keep their reigning champion Nelson Piquet Jr. around, as if he can't defend his title, as it seems he won't be able to do this year? He'll be looking for another ride.
I think it will be, because they just haven't been on pace for any of the races this season.
Oh, well, they've tried to go for this unconventional setup, whereas Andretti and Team Aguri have stuck with their Season 1 powertrain and are doing pretty well. They're doing better than most people expected. Why is that?
That's just data and knowledge on the actual units, from the McLaren motor to the Williams battery. So they've got a good understanding, they've got the data, they've got all the information they need. So they would have brought light improvements, probably more to the actual motor side, get the efficiency up, get that running perfectly from what they've learned in Season 1. I mean, like Robin Freins, I think he's 7th overall, which is pretty fantastic, because they're on Season 1 technology, because everybody wrote them out at the start of the seasons. They know they're going to be last and they're not going to be competitive, but they've shown the doubters wrong and they're proved from last season.
Absolutely. Well, Andretti made the brave decision. Well, they were sort of forced into it. They had a new powertrain. They were testing that, and testing it wasn't going well, and they switched back to their S1 powertrain. That proves to be quite the smart move, and it begs the question: why was there a need to sort of switch up the powertrains?
I think the teams were striving for that extra bit of performance. They really wanted to fight up the top end, because Venturi spoke about it quite clearly. They wanted to be at the top end, so they incorporated new motors into their car, an extra 15 kilowatts of energy. So they were really pushing for it. So I think on the whole field are all pushing to be at podium places, the business end of the grid.
Okay, well, speaking of Venturi just there, Dragon Racing are using their power units, which is supplied by Venturi. Dragon are outpacing their manufacturer.
Yeah, didn't think you'd see the day. It's similar to Formula 1. We've seen Williams outpace the actual Mercedes car. So time to time, a team who are using different technology to the actual manufacturer, they can get better understanding. They've got a good understanding, they've got the right heads, looking in the right areas, so there must be good organisation there to get the direction correct.
And that's just about all we have time for. My thanks to Stefan, Lawrence and Bethany. Don't forget you can catch the next ePrix in Buenos Aires, Argentina on the 6th of February. To find out where you can watch it in your country, just go to the FIA Formula E website. And for even more breaking news and opinion throughout the season, make e-racing.net your go-to website for all things electric in 2016. And don't forget to give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram. That's all from me, but until next time, I've been Harry Benjamin. Goodbye.